Welcome, my name is Brian Sheehy. I'm the History Department Coordinator at North Andover High. Going to talk a little bit today about the history of object-based learning and lessons. Start a little quote by Socrates. I cannot teach anybody anything. I can only make them think. It's one of the things we really like about object-based learning is it makes you think about the object, about how it fits into the scope of what you're teaching, what you're learning. And it's a great way for you to interact with your students and get them to think and not just spit back a bunch of facts to you. So a lot of people ask, what is object-based learning or lessons? Object-based learning is a student-centered approach that uses objects to facilitate deep thinking. Object-based learning teaches students how to think, not what to remember, and that is key. Objects may take many forms, small or large, but the method typically involves students handling or working at close quarters with and interrogating physical artifacts. At the end of this, we'll talk a little bit more about typically what that means. The objects are brought into the learning environment for small group teaching or large group lectures. In this way, the use of objects can act as a multi-sensory thinking tool to promote learning and engagement. What is an object lesson? This is from a teacher in 1882 in Maine. And I'm not going to read the whole thing to you, but it gets into a lot of the things that we're looking for today. An object lesson is a conversation. It's a back and forth. You present an idea to a student, or you present an object to a student, and they interpret it, and you have a back and forth dialogue. They tell you what they see, and you ask them questions and engage with them in a way that it's conversational. And if you do this with a large group of students, this discussion can morph and different students can give their perspective. And it's a great approach to kind of getting an inclusive look at an object. This kind of thinking goes all the way back to the Enlightenment. Instruction must begin with actual inspection, not with verbal descriptions of things. From such inspection, it is that certain knowledge comes. What is actually seen remains faster in memory than description. Basically, you can see, and if you can see something and you can inspect it, it becomes more memorable for you. This is by a teacher in the 17th century, considered a father of modern education, focused on logical thinking over dull memorization. And you're going to hear a lot about that. That's one of the debates we have in classrooms all the time. What should students be able to do? What should they know? What should they remember? Okay, and it's kind of a debate back and forth. Should they know all of this content, or should they be able to learn the skills and thinking skills on how to become informed thinkers? Also look at John Locke. Ideas come from sensation of reflection, from one's actual experience of the external physical material world, or from consideration of the internal workings of the mind. Okay, can you truly understand something without experiencing it, without seeing it? Okay, being a history teacher myself, how can a student really understand the perspective of a soldier being in a trench in World War I without picking up a helmet, without engaging in some of the artifacts that person may have had with them in the trench? So a lot of this comes from a Swiss reformer, Pezzoli. Lessons drawn from actual things became a way to make ideas clear to children and to develop their mental capacity. This mode of pedagogy replaced both textual description and counterfeits, like pictorial representations with the observation of the encounter with actual things. Think about young children. How do they learn? They learn with objects. You go to children's museums, and there's a lot of things that they can interact with, and that is a great way to engage students. And that way of learning and engaging in things can continue all the way up through high school, and even adults can really benefit from this approach to object-based learning. And observing. Observation is the absolute basis of all knowledge. The first object then in education must be to lead a child to observe with accuracy. The second, to express with correctness the results of that observation. Okay, that's something in all disciplines of education. You want the student to see, observe, and then draw conclusions. Okay, and make their own and come to their own conclusions on something. So that was Pizzoli. His ideas kind of came to fruition with people like Charles Mayo and Elizabeth Mayo. They were a brother and sister combo in England. And in the 19th century, they started publishing a lot of books on object-based lessons and object-based learning to provide a way for teachers to incorporate this approach to their classroom. Okay, their students were encouraged through dialogue to explore different materials by looking, touching, smelling, and tasting, using your senses and really kind of getting into an object and analyzing it, drawing conclusions, making interpretations, all of the things that are really important in authentic learning. Here are some books that they wrote. This I thought was kind of interesting by Elizabeth Mayo. Lessons produce more continued interest or more enlarge the minds of children than those on objects. To lead children to observe with attention the objects which surround them. Kind of just slowing down and taking a look at everything and investigating. And that's what we want our students to do. And when they go into a museum, when they see an object, or when objects are brought into the classroom, observing, drawing conclusions, all of that kind of modes of thinking. These are some actual boxes that were created in the 19th century that students could pick up and see what these objects were and what stones felt like, what cotton felt like, so that they had a deeper understanding and appreciation for it. Okay. Here are some other examples. This idea kind of came to the United States. Was the Oswego Normal School in New York. They introduced a new course for primary schools in which lessons on form, color, size, weight, animals, plants, and human body and moral instruction were taught. And you can see that picture on the bottom right. You see the skeleton. And through actual observation of the skeleton, or in the case of the picture on the left, the actual dog, teachers would have dialogues back and forth with their students and ask them questions about what they see, what they observe, kind of like science experiments, you know. And students were able to build off of other students' responses and their perspectives. And that's a great way of learning and teaching, is kind of having that dialogue back and forth. Okay, the goal of 19th century education, educators hope through object lessons, children will learn to derive meaning from the material world and to reason both critically and morally based on this knowledge. The hope was that students trained in this method would approach the world with curiosity and confidence of making their own rational and moral judgment. That's key. That's what we want as teachers today, too. We want our students to be empowered enough to make informed decisions, all right? And again, nothing has changed from the 19th century to today. You still want to create or enable students to take material, synthesize it, and then draw their own conclusions. Okay. Going back to the teacher in Maine in 1882, object lessons proposed that children to discover for themselves and state to the teacher the result of their investigation, observe, and report out. Those who attempt object lessons by merely reading or rehearsing certainly fail to understand that the end of such school exercise is found decidedly more in the how than in the what. The process is important, okay? That's one of the things that I think teachers struggle with is, well, what am I supposed to do next? It's going to happen organically, especially with object-based learning. Students are going to see different things than you might see. And you're going to, as a teacher, have to kind of navigate through that and be able to have and feel comfortable enough having that dialogue back and forth with your students, because that's how real learning and teaching takes place. Really like this, how they outlined kind of the importance of object lessons. And this is in 1882. And there's so many of these things are going to be things that we value today as teachers. The power and accuracy of observation. We want our students to see things. We want our students to have their eyes wide open so that they can interpret the world around them. And then be able to express what they see and be able to articulate what they see, okay? They're led to talk because they get excited because it's something that they can own. When we've brought in students into our history lab that we have in North Andover, different students are attracted to different objects and different things. Like some students who are really interested in music may kind of gravitate towards songbooks. Students who are kind of high tech and love tech stuff. Maybe they go to like a 1980s computer and they're drawn to that. And that excitement about history, that excitement to want to know more is what we're trying to achieve in our classrooms. And when students feel comfortable in the topic, they get excited about it and they want to know more. And they're then able to present these ideas to their class, to other people, and that's an important piece of learning. Object lessons lead children into fields of inquiry to which their attention might not otherwise be called. When you ask students to slow down and look at things, they really observe everything and they're able to see everything. Object lessons afford variety in schoolwork. How many times are students given a worksheet or lectured at? Okay, bringing an object in is different. So many of our students, with their feedback on using objects in their classroom, they're like, oh, this was great. It was different than what we usually do. I really enjoyed it. So there's appreciation of just varying up what they typically do. Object lessons in the lower grades prepare for books, and in the higher, they supplement them, okay? A lot of object-based learning, if you have kids who struggle with reading, English language learners, they're still able to get concepts through those objects, and it breaks down some of the barriers that they might have. And we found at the high school level that with these objects and these gallery walks that we've put together, they do a great job of supplementing what the teacher's already taught and reinforcing some of the things and bringing to life what the teacher mentioned in previous lessons. Object lessons supply the elements from which science must be constructed. Okay, you're looking at observation, you're looking at hypothesis, you're looking at all kinds of things. And again, a lot of the stuff that I talked about here is what we want in 21st century critical thinkers. Okay, so the concepts of object-based learning that were prevalent in the 19th century are still prevalent today. We want our students to make real-world applications. We want them to think critically. We want them to communicate accurately. We want them to reflect. We want them to analyze, to reason. All of those thinking skills are prevalent in object-based learning, and that dialogue back and forth. Okay. So how do you break it down? How do you do this? How do you break down an object? The easiest way to really kind of break it down is see, think, wonder. Observe, reason, and analyze, and then begin to investigate and ask questions, okay? Types of critical thinking that students are doing when they work with objects: observing and describing, reasoning with evidence. And I'm going to give you some questions that you could ask when looking at objects. Questioning and investigating, comparing and connecting, exploring viewpoints, finding complexity. There's so much you can do with objects to make connections to other things. Have them work on skills that are really integral in critical thinking. Here are some questions, just kind of like, what is the object? How is it put together? How big is it? How small is it? Does it smell? How does it feel? Just kind of getting like that kind of gets you into the analyzing of the object. You can follow it up with who produced it, how was it produced, who made it, how does it feel, how does it make you feel, how might this change over time, human wear, kind of just analyzing and interpreting what this object is all about. Okay, does the object fit into a known genre? How does it interact with your body? What is the object's history? I mean, all of these questions are questions that you can ask your students to get them to think deeper on this object, and hopefully to try to get them to connect it to the topic that you're studying in your classroom. If you guys have any questions on that, here's my contact. Really a strong believer in object-based learning, and hopefully this will be something that continues on and we can grow. Thank you.